Welcome back, everybody, to the Insightful Podcast. We gain insight in order to move forward in life. Today's episode is going to be about something that maybe you've never heard of in this kind of way, but rest is actually a skill and not a reward. You'll see what I mean in a second, but before we get into it, if you guys have been enjoying the Insightful Podcast so far, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know any other future topics you'd like me to discuss in the future. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Rest isn't laziness, it's maintenance. You don't wait for your car to break down to service it. Your body and mind are no different. And I think this is such a good analogy because you may be thinking, rest is a reward. After a long day of doing a bunch of things, dealing with a bunch of different people, I need rest and that's my reward. But what you do not realize is that to rest properly and to rest efficiently is actually a skill, right? And this is why I'm talking about this today is recently I would say it was the first time that I actually got burnt out. And because of that, I took some time away from the gym. I took some time away from the business, took some time away from making content every single day. And what I realized is that I felt this way for a very long time, but I just kept pushing forward. So, what did it lead me to? It led me to taking a bunch of days off in a row. But I think what really matters is that if I was able to identify that I was reaching my boiling point in terms of grinding and hustling and being as productive as possible, I could have just taken 1 to 2 days off completely and I would have felt refreshed and I would have been able to get back to it much quicker. So I think that's super important is that rest is a skill when you're able to identify when you need it and when it makes sense to rest and take a break. That is super important, right? For the second point is earned rest is a toxic narrative. If you only allow yourself to rest after burning out, you've turned recovery into a punishment, right? Like imagine you need to get so much work done that for tonight you can only get 2 hours of sleep. You need to ask yourself, is that productive within itself? Absolutely not, because you know that if you stay up all night, you only get 2 hours of sleep and then you wake up and try to do your next day, everything is going to feel like a chore. Everything that is easy to you on a daily basis is going to feel extremely difficult. So I think it's important that you're able to realize that it's not just about, pushing as hard as possible all the time. And that if you don't earn your rest, you can't have it. I think it's much more efficient to realize when it's needed, take the rest needed, and then get back to the same thing that you were doing, right? It's like I was saying in a previous podcast that, me taking 4 days off in a row isn't going to change my physique that much. It's not probably not going to change it at all. It's just this mental thing that I have that if, oh, I take rest, I'm not doing enough, I'm not making any progress, when that's most of the time far from that, right? For the third point is rest requires intention, not just inactivity. Scrolling isn't rest. Netflix isn't rest. True rest is conscious and restorative. Learn the difference, right? This is something that maybe I didn't do the best with this week because my rest was intentional, but how I decided to take that rest could have been much better. Maybe your rest looks like waking up, getting 8 hours of sleep, doing some uh what's it called, like some cold showers, some cold plunges, stretching, taking some time away from the screens, reading a book, going for a walk outside, just everything, I guess, physically that's restorative and everything that's mentally that's restorative. Maybe you pray more that day, maybe you meditate more that day, you stretch more, you do all these different things that are recovery based in that field. If it's physical, you're recovering physically and then you're also recovering mentally. And it's most of the time, it's not that the body becomes super in need of this long term rest. A lot of the times, it's the mind because your mind is constantly going. You're constantly thinking about, I need to do more. I need to do this. I need to achieve this. And that gets very tiring after a while. And I think when you're at your breaking point, that is exactly when you should take the much needed rest. For the fourth point, your nervous system needs downtime to upgrade. Progress isn't made in the grind, it's sealed during rest. No recovery equals no growth. There was a point in time, man, I was getting like 4 hours of sleep every single night, and I was going to the gym, I was eating a lot of calories, whatever. But I actually noticed that it wasn't making much progress in the gym. It was much more difficult for me to get stronger. It was much more difficult for me to even be willing to go to the gym and push myself because I was so drained, right? And what you don't realize, and it's the reality, is like you make all your gains when you're recovering, not when you're pushing yourself in the gym, right? So as much as you love training and maybe you do it for other reasons, not just like building a great physique, maybe it's something that just keeps you in a good mood on a day-to-day basis. What you need to realize is that the rest is actually where you're making all the progress. There's a lot of times I'll read a book and then I kind of forget what I read in the moment, but then I sleep and then I wake up and it's like everything's in my mind again. And I think that all comes from needing time to rest and needing time to recover, right? For the fifth and final point is productivity culture fears stillness. The world says go, but your soul says slow. Learning to rest without guilt is a form of rebellion and healing. I think it's super important, right? Because no matter how much rest you take, if you're always in a guilty conscious when taking it, it'll never feel great. It'll never feel refreshing, right? So a lot of times you get great ideas too when you're in stillness, when your mind is not racing 24/7 and you're kind of just relaxing, right? So I think it's crucial to even you're just like if you're not resting, if you're not recovering properly, it'll actually set you further back, right? So all I'm trying to get at with this podcast is that if you're burnt out right now, you need to change it. You need to take some rest, take some time away, and I'm telling you, you will come back much more productive, much more driven, and the discipline will be much easier. Well, that's all I wanted to go over in this episode of the podcast. Thank you, everybody who made it this far. Remember to follow us on Spotify and let me know any other future topics you'd like me to discuss in the upcoming episodes. And let me know any guests that you would like to be on the podcast. I'll try my best to get them on. There will be some guest episodes coming very, very soon. So stay tuned. Thank you, everybody. And I'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Crush a cold to a diamond, eyes forever shining. Your beauty alone inspire a nigga to rhyming.